So guys, another blunder looms. President Tinubu has given about 100 generals of the Nigerian army until tomorrow to submit their retirement forms. I mean, voluntarily they should just retire. My people, this is another leadership blunder, honestly, because we are in a time that you can't just retire these generals without getting the necessary information that they have, in securing Nigeria. You can't just come and fire generals. I mean, these are people that have some important information when it comes to securing Nigeria.
Retirements of military officers is a Rise News analyst. Frank Tete joining us tonight. Good, as always, to see you. Well, listening to retired Group Captain Sadiq Shehu there, he questioned the rationale behind having so many generals in the Nigerian military. You might want to touch on that. But what do you make of this order, I mean, from the military, giving generals, up to Monday to pick up their forms, their voluntary retirement forms, giving them up to Monday, for the simple reason that a few, soldiers have been appointed as service chiefs, and so this number of generals, over 100 of them, have to be sacrificed. What's the really rationale behind this?
Oh, well, rationale. The defense headquarters struggled to give a rationale. That is, there is a long-standing military tradition. What long-standing military tradition? You asked a very interesting question, that why do we have quite a number of generals? I will answer that because as a boy growing up in 1983-84, I recall that, there were only two major generals when the army took over. I think Major General Buhari and then Major General Donkat Bali. So the big boys like Ibrahim Babangida and General Abacha were all brigadiers. As Babangida's chief of army staff was a brigadier. And even the chief of Chief of Staff Supreme Headquarters, Tunde Diagbon, was a brigadier. So, so a boy at that time coming to see this large number of generals in Nigeria actually becomes shocking to me. But going back to that long-standing military tradition, you see, in Nigeria, the armed forces are actually created by the Constitution pursuant to Section 217. And the provision of the Constitution also recommends that the National Assembly makes a law for the management and administration of the armed forces. To pursuant to that, the Armed Forces Act was actually enacted. And pursuant to the Armed Forces Act, there is nothing like military tradition. And it was also the idea of compulsory retirement or voluntary retirement. That idea is unknown to the governance of our armed forces. Where is it coming from? So you're talking about a military tradition that is now superior to Nigeria's constitution and the law that regulates the Nigerian army? So that's not to even talk about, and not necessarily the army alone, armed forces. Let me be very broad, Yeah. And again, it goes with a lot of implications when you do this. And because it hasn't often been challenged, then we think it's right. How would you allow a country invest so much in training officers of the armed forces, and for political reasons, you just ask them to retire? And they will retire because the tradition they should talk about is that of obey before complain. Right. So I'm aware that some of those generals have actually turned in their retirement letters, voluntary retirement letters, but everything is wrong with it. And who is making that directive? It's coming from the president, who is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. You forget that in the Armed Forces Act, there are certain bodies that must actually meet to approve the retirement of such senior officers, either the Armed Forces Council, the Navy Board, the Army Council, or the Air Council. But if these councils are not in existence, because first you have to have a Minister of Defense in place who actually plays a very important role in chairing those councils, particularly of the services. Right. So you don't have that. So who is giving? Should the Chief of Defense Staff have that authority to issue directive to the senior military generals to retire? Again, you need to also consider this. It's important. So Why? When you say, even if you must interrogate the military tradition, so are you saying, for example, General Lagbaja, for example, who is the chief of army staff today?
Yeah.
I mean, does he also give commands or orders to the members of the Navy or the Air Force? So must you ensure that those who are below General Lagbaja must retire from the army? And so this is this purge is not like Sadiq. I watched that Sadiq's interview in the morning. I mean, in the afternoon. It's actually a loss for everyone. A loss for the soldier, a loss for the country, and a loss for us, ordinary Nigerians.
Now, when you talk about the losses, loss for the army, loss for the Nigerian government, loss for the citizens, we're having this conversation in the newsroom earlier, and I was asking my colleague about the implications to our security architecture, especially at such a time as this, when we're battling insecurity in Nigeria. What does this mean for our insecurity status or insecurity challenges as we speak?
First, it is illegal to compel persons serving in our military to retire when they have not attained the age of 60 or have served for 35 years. And the president must appreciate this, that if there is a long-standing military tradition, I'll deal with the insecurity issue you've raised, but this is quite important and sad because it hasn't been challenged. This tradition has become so long, and this kind of purge is costing us so much in every way, including insecurity. Now, you just appointed service chiefs. What you have done, even if he were to be of the same rank with his classmates, you just elevated him by 1 star. He's ahead of them. So there is no question about the idea of a tradition that he will give an order and one certain general will not obey. He will be that general will be court-martialed according to the Armed Forces Act. So that's not tenable. It is wrong. And so when you say insecurity, the insecurity now starts for insecure individuals who now man these services. Doesn't mean that they are afraid that their classmates will do one thing or the other, will check them. No, you don't have to be personally insecure. Now, dealing with insecurity generally, you look at the armed forces of countries that are strong. You look at the generals, wither beaten. You see them, you know that these guys are tested. But you see our generals are looking very fine and refined, looking very, very, very polished. I mean, I'm not saying that. Well, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. But look at those who are retired. Look at General Henry Yola, who comes on air all the time. Fine-looking young man. Why should that kind of general be retired, for goodness sake? When he was involved in one sort of command or the other, fighting insurgency, very important command. Now, what happens? We complain all the time about high turnover rate in the National Assembly. When we invest, when we talk about institutional memory, we're a country at war, whether you like it or not. Right. A section of our country appears to still be struggling with the issue of insecurity, dealing with high-level terrorism, international terrorism, and banditry of a very high level. And you just delight in retiring the people who have the real memory and strategic memory of dealing with the war.
In other words,
it's unfair. More especially because those who should complain are not complaining.
Great. The point you're making now is Nigeria, on no account, can afford this kinds of retirement, massive, in the military. But let me quote 2 points made by the retired General Loki Rabo, the CDS. At some point this year, he actually warned that, look, don't play politics with the military. Also quoting him, why we need retired soldiers in the fight against insecurity. What that means is, look, yeah, they may be pulled out and what have you, they may be retiring, but it will not,
they're not tired.
Yeah, they're not tired. And yes, and it will not be to Nigeria's advantage not to, explore the experiences that these people have had. 37 years, that's no mean feat, and all of that. Very, very important.
Indeed. And to also now think that when you look at the high cost of maintaining military officers who are retired, you think it's a joke? You think you've got to pay them seriously while they're in retirement? Yeah. In fact, some of these senior generals, you've got to even give them sort of attachés. What do you call them? Orderlies and the rest of them. You have to still fund them for what? For doing nothing? So the long-standing military tradition has to be checked. I recall, and this should be checked, General Tukur Buratai was of the Course 29, regular Course 29. When he was appointed Chief of Army Staff, you didn't hear of a purge of his juniors who belonged to either Course 28 28 or 27. You know, so there was some of the mastery in managing it. And I think Borutai had a very long-standing time as the Chief of Army Staff where there were no issues of, command and control, problems. So I think that we need to revisit it. I raised the issue of those who should complain. This is the Nigerian Armed Forces, not the Armed Forces of President Bola Tinubu. So the real stakeholders should tell the president, look, you can't be dealing with our armed forces like this. Section 18 of the Armed Forces Act says that president, before you make appointments of the service chiefs, make wide consultations with the minister, with the chief of defense staff. But we see a situation where we didn't have a minister of defense, we didn't have a chief of defense staff, but the president goes ahead, even though if you look at what section 18 says, that nobody should dare inquire from the president whether or not he consulted these persons. But the point is that these persons must be on ground. I had expected the governors, because there was a new dimension when governors rose when Nigerians were suffering because of the Naira change and all that. The governors should have called the president to order and said, please, you've got to recall that because the Nigerian Armed Forces, I can attest to this, truly represents national character in this country. To that extent, the governor should have called the president and said, please, you just can't retire this large number of persons that are meant to secure Nigeria. You have to have another look at it. Did this order come from the president? Did the CDS, is the CDS now exalting the military tradition above Nigerian law?
We're told the orders actually came from the military. And you also have to bear in mind the debarment allowance that needs to be paid to all of them, right? Yeah. Signed by President Buhari in 2017.
Time will not permit us to talk
unfortunately.
About the debarment allowance and all that.
Yeah.
But he mentioned the fact that they still have to be funded anyway. So
of course they have to be.
Talking about leadership, we all know that Peter Obi transformed the education system in Anambra State without sacking any of the teachers. He has always told us that he worked with all the old teachers that were there without bringing in anybody new. But we all know the result. What was the secret? He knew the problems and he tackled the problems without sacking any of the teachers. And is it that these are leaders lack ideas at this time? How can you just wake up and you give 100 generals about just few days to apply for them to be retired? So guys, when we talk about leadership, honestly, Peter Obi has everything it takes to rescue Nigeria. And that is why we are calling on the judiciary to do the needful. The judiciary has to rescue Nigeria because Nigeria has fallen into the wrong hand. Remember when Buhari came into power, he retired many of the key players in the army, especially those of them from the southeast. He retired many of them. So this politics now, leadership in Nigeria is all about self-interest. When they come in, they look around and they select some number of persons and just retire them. Don't forget that these generals will be paid heavily, because if you are retiring somebody, you don't send him home empty-handed. You retire him, giving him enough money, giving him aids, cars, and so many things. So guys, you have seen it for yourself. You have seen what we are into. Honestly, Nigerians have to wake up and resist this kind of leadership because we need a new Nigeria. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Please subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Thank you.